Masechta Shabbos, Perek Yud Aleph, Mishnah Aleph. Again, we're going to have another perek that's going to discuss primarily the Dinei Hoitzah. This is not so much Hoitzah with carrying, but it's more Hoitzah with throwing and other types of Hoitzah. So Hazerik Mershus Hayochid Rishus Harabim, Mershus Harabim Rishus Hayochid Chayiv. If somebody throws an object from a Rishus Hayochid to Rishus Harabim, or from Rishus Harabim to Rishus Hayochid, he's Chayiv for Hoitzah. Again, we must mention that all malachas are learned in the construction of the Mishkan and the Midbar. Hoitzah was Aser as an Av Malacha because in the desert the Levium were mighty the Kroshim that formed the walls of the Mishkan from Rishus Harabim, which was the public area around the Mishkan, to Rishus Hayochid, which were the wagons that were used to transport the Kroshim from place to place, and from Rishus Hayochid to Rishus Harabim, from the wagons to the new site of where they were building the Mishkan. Although the Levium carried the Kroshim, didn't throw them, throwing is also Aser as a Tolda of Hoitzah, because when a person throws something from one Rishus to another, he lifts the object which is in Akira from one Rishus and places it down with a Hanacha in the other Rishus, and that's the basic parts of Hoitzah. But Mershus Hayochid, Rishus Hayochid, Rishus Harabim be'emtza. What's the halacha if someone throws an item from one Rishus Hayochid to another Rishus Hayochid, and Rishus Harabim is between them? For example, you have one side of the street to another side of the street. You have a front porch of one house, and you have a front porch of the other house, and you're throwing it through the Rishus Harabim. Rabbi Kiva Machayev, Rabbi Kiva says that he's chayiv because when the object passes through the Rishus Harabim, it's viewed as if it came to make a hanocha over there. But Chachamim say no. Chachamim say that he's pater because the object did not land in the Rishus Harabim, and it is not viewed as if it did. What is Rabbi Kiva talking about? What are the Chachamim talking about? What's the machlekes here? Rabbi Kiva holds that something that's contained in the airspace of a rishus is viewed as if it has come to rest in it. Kluta kamisha huncha. That is, that when an object enters the airspace of a different rishus, it's encompassed by that domain and coordinates. Even if it doesn't land, it's halachically regarded as having come to rest there. In the case of our Mishnah, since the item passed through the Rishus Harabim, it's halachically considered as if it landed in it, and the person who threw it from Rishus Hayochid is therefore going to be chayiv. Accordingly, he is chayiv only if the thrown object traveled within 10 tefachim of the ground, since the Rishus Harabim extends only to this height. So if you have a second floor of a building, or a third floor of a building, or even a high up first floor of a building that's higher than 10 tefachim, and you throw it over the Rishus Harabim, if it goes over the Rishus Harabim, then that airspace is a carmelis. It's not in the Rishus Harabim. If it's within the 10 tefachim, that's the discussion that we're holding. And the Chachamim say pater in such a case because they don't say klutz kamisha huncha dami. Therefore, the object is not viewed as having come to make a hanocha in Rishus Harabim. The only hoitzah that took place was for one Rishus Hayochid to another Rishus Hayochid, which is obviously not chayiv. Mishnah Beis, Ketzad, what are we talking about? I mean, what was this? Machlekes Rabbi Kiva and Chachamim. Shtei gzut tzurei zu keneged zu Rishus Harabim. Hamoishet v'hazerik mizul zu pater. What's the case of the Mishnah in which a person that does hitzah with one item for one Rishus to another Rishus, and from one Rishus Hayochid to another Rishus Hayochid, Rishus Harabim be'emtzad, that he's pater? The discussion is shtei gzut tzurei zu keneged zu Rishus Harabim. The two balconies, each with the proper share of a Rishus Hayochid, they face each other on the opposite sides of the street, which is Rishus Harabim. So whether a person hands the item or throws it from one balcony to another, he's going to be pater. But if they're both on the same side of the street, meaning if both balconies were coming out of one upper story and both were on the same side of the street, pater. The one who hands an item from one balcony to the other is chayiv, but one who throws the item from one balcony to the other is pater. Because this was the way that the Levium did the avodah in the midbar by the Mishkan, because they had they set up two wagons, one behind the other lengthwise in Rishus Harabim, and they handed the kroshim of the Mishkan from one wagon to another along the length of the Rishus Harabim, but they did not throw the beams from one wagon to another. So we therefore learn from the procedure that the Levium did in handling the Mishkan, the one who hands something from one Rishus Hayochid to another Rishus Hayochid along the length of Rishus Harabim is chayiv. However, one who throws something along the length of a Rishus Harabim is pater, since there's no precedent in the working of the Levium to make this a malacha. which is interesting. It's not even a tolda. It's not a malacha b'chlal. According to the Chachamim, one is chayiv for haitzah, for one Rishus Yachid to another Rishus Rabbim, to another through a Rishus Rabbim, only if he transfers it in the same way it was done in the Mishkan in the Midbar. The Leviim did haitzah with the beams, with the krushim, only by handling them, and not by throwing them, and they transferred them along the length of the Rishus Rabbim, not across its width. Therefore, a person who throws an item from one Rishus Yachid to another along the length of the Rishus Rabbim, or who hands it across the width of a Rishus Rabbim instead of its length, is pater, and is not going to be is pater. Although, so here we're going to address the question. The Taisus Yantif explains this. Although usually a malacha need not correspond exactly to the procedure in the Mishkan to be considered a talda, the malacha of haitzah is yaitz min klal, because the malacha of haitzah is an unusual type of malacha. Since it's not aser in ganzen, it's only between a Rishus Rabbim and a Rishus Yochid, we can therefore not logically include in it anything that does not correspond exactly to the procedure in the Mishkan from which it is derived. And that's the pshat in what Taisa says on Daf Beis, that Haitzah Malacha Grua, that it's very difficult to learn things out of it because, in a certain sense, it's very specific. Bishul is aser all across the board. There's no heter of Bishul on Shabbos. If it's in a Kli Shlishi, then it's not Bishul. Haitzah, there are Haitzahs that are pater, even if they're not Haitzahs that are going to be mutter, which even are Haitzahs that are going to be mutter, because you have, let's say, by a Makam Pitor. But that's the chidush of what the Mishnah is saying over here. Chulias habor v'hasela shengavoy nasar v'rochvan arba. The earth removes from a pit and it's piled around the edges like a wall. That's the chulias habor. You have a pit, and the dirt that you dug out of it is surrounding the top of the bor like a wall, and a rock. That's a sela that are 10 tvachim high and 4 tvachim wide. They're considered a rishus hayochiv. Sahanaitel mehen v'anisin al gabon chayiv. When it takes an item from one of them and places it into rishus harabim, or takes an item from rishus harabim and places it on either a chulias habor or a sela, is chayiv for haitzah between the Rishus Yachid and Rishus Rabbim. Parchas became potter. However, if the dimensions of the earth around the pit, plus in the depth of the pit itself, or the dimensions of the rock are less than 10 tvachim high, 4 tvachim wide, the one who takes an item for them and places it in Rishus Rabbim, or vice versa, is potter because he didn't transfer an item between Rishus Yachid and Rishus Rabbim. Question would be, if you have a small garbage can in Rishus Rabbim, so that could be a Mokum Patur. If you have a 90-something gallon garbage can, it's very shaykh that it's 10 tvachim high, it's very shaykh that it's 4 tvachim wide, it's very shaykh that it's its own egg and Rishus Hayachid. See, I got to be careful with that. Mishnah Gimel. Hazerik arba amas b'koyse l'mayla me'asar tvachim. If someone throws an item such as a sticky fig cake, 4 amas in Rishus Rabbim, and sticks to a wall in the Rishus Rabbim, but it's above 10 tvachim from the ground, it's kezerik ba'avir, it's as if he threw it in the air and it never landed, because the airspace above the 10 tvachim is not considered part of the Rishus Rabbim. He is therefore not violated the Isser of being Maver Dalet Amos Rishus Rabbim. But it's a Makam Patur. Lamatam Esar tvachim kezerik baretz. But if it's stuck to the wall within 10 tvachim of the ground, it's as if he threw it on the ground and it landed there. Since it's stuck to the wall, it's considered to have landed. Since it's within the 10 tvachim of the ground of the Rishus Rabbim, it's considered to have landed in the Rishus Rabbim, so he would be chayiv. Zerik ba'aretz arba amas chayiv. One who throws an object 4 amas onto the ground of Rishus Rabbim is going to be chayiv. Since the wall is 4 amas away from where the fig cake was thrown, landing on the side of the wall is like landing on the ground 4 amas from the point of the akira. Even if most of the devela remains within the original 4 amas, the thrower is chayiv as long as the place on which the devela landed is 4 amas away, because the cake is considered to be in that place. I guess even if not, the whole thing goes along with it. Zorak l'seich arba amas in his galgal chusli arba amas potter. If someone threw an item intending that it land within the dalet amas or where he's standing, but it rolled beyond the dalet amas and came to rest over there, he's potter because he didn't intend to throw it there. When it's not chayiv from Allah, he did not intend to do, because some Allah is machshavas. Shavei lein iskaven l'zrika shel chiyuv. He was never mechaven for the zrikas hachiyuv. Chutz arba amas in his galgal l'seich arba amas chayiv. But if he threw an item intending that it land beyond 4 amas and it landed there for a moment, but then it rolled back into the dalet amas, he's chayiv because he intended to throw it far enough to be chayiv, and it landed there for a moment. The fact that the item rolled back into the dalet amas doesn't undo the chil Shabbos that already happened, therefore he's going to be chayiv. Mishnah Dalet. Hazerik b'yam arba amas pater. Someone who throws an item dalet amas in the sea is pater because the sea is a carmelist and it's not a Rishus Rabbim. For example, he He was wading or swimming in the sea, which is a problem which he probably shouldn't be doing anyways. And he lifted an item from one place in the water and tossed it to another place in the water more than 4 amos away. So he's not going to be chayiv because it's a karmelis. A karmelis is the area that's neither Rishus Yochid nor Rishus Rabbim. Min HaTorah is considered a makom patur and it's treated like a Rishus Rabbim only midrabanan. Therefore, whenever who does haitzah with an item for Daled Amos in the sea is patur min HaTorah. Although the sea serves as a highway for ships and boats that travel on it, the Torah does not recognize this as Rishus Rabbim. This is because halachas of Rishus Rabbim are learned from the encampment of Bnei Yisrael in the Midbar, where they had improvised roads set aside for travel. Since there's no part of the sea set aside for traffic, it's not similar to the Mishkan of the Bnei Yisrael in the Midbar, and it's not considered a Rishus Rabbim. Because even if technically speaking, according to those that you don't need Yishum Riboy, and you have the width of the Chamesh Esrei Amos, or Sheish Amos, whatever, it's 15 amos wide, but you don't have, it's not a makam of Hiluch Rabbim. If there is a shallow pool of muddy water in the street and people using the Rishus Rabbim walk through it, one who throws an item for amos in this puddle is chayav because this puddle is considered part of the Rishus Rabbim. How shallow must such a puddle or pool be to be considered a part of the Rishus Rabbim? Anything that's less than 10 tvachim should be fine. If there's a shallow pool of muddy water in the street and people are using the Rishus Rabbim to walk through it, even if they're more than 4 amos to cross through, and people sometimes avoid it, one who throws an item Daled Amos in this puddle is chai because it's still considered part of the Rishus Rabbim. The fact that there are more than 4 amos of water to cross through, and people therefore sometimes look around this puddle, doesn't negate the fact that it's still considered part of the Rishus Rabbim as long as it's less than 10 tvachim deep. Although the Mishnah itself does not explicitly specify this point, it chazes over this halacha to indicate that this additional point is true. Mishnah Hey. Having learned about doing haitzah Daled Amos in a body of water that's within a Rishus Rabbim, the Mishnah now teaches about transferring an item, doing a haitzah from a body of water to different Rishus. If someone throws an item from the sea to the land, or from the land to the sea, or from the sea to a boat, or from a boat to the sea, or from one boat to another boat over the water, pater, he's pater because the sea is a karmelis, as we mentioned in the previous Mishnah. He's pater in the first case because even if the land is a Rishus Rabbim, there's no chiyuv for transferring between a karmelis and a Rishus Rabbim. And he's pater in the second case because even if the boat is Rishus Yochid, there's no chiyuv for haitzah between a karmelis and a Rishus Yochid. And he's pater in the last case because even if both boats are Rishus Yochids, there's no chiyuv for transferring over a karmelis from one Rishus Yochid to another. Although there's a machlekes whether one is chayav for transferring from one Rishus Yochid to another Rishus Yochid over a Rishus Rabbim, as we mentioned in the Mishnah Aleph and Beis, everyone agrees that there's no chiyuv deraisa for doing haitzah for one Rishus Yochid to another Rishus Yochid over a karmelis. In some cases, it's even completely mutter, as the Mishnah will teach below, as we'll see in the next case. Up to this point, the Mishnah was discussing cases for which there's no chiyuv deraisa, but where transferring an item is asur midrabanan. The Mishnah now specifies a case where it's actually mutter to transfer, to do haitzah from one boat to another. If 2 boats that belong to different people are tied together with a gap less than 4 tvachim between them, one may transfer items from one boat to the other, provided that an eruvei chatzeris is made. An eruvei chatzeris is a device that allows people to carry from one person's house to a neighboring house through a common courtyard. One makes the eruv by placing a loaf of bread in one house and making this a shared residence. There must not be 4 tvachim between the boats, otherwise the sea, which is a karmelis, would separate between them and would be mevatel, the eruvei chatzeris that allows them from carrying from one boat to another. So im einon kshurais, however, if they're not tied together, even though they're close together, with less than 4 tvachim between them, we may not transfer items from one to another because the chachamim were concerned that they may drift apart, and it would invalidate, it would be mevatel the eruvei chatzeris between them. Since untied boats may drift 4 tvachim apart, in which case being mitzi from one to the other would be atzim midrabanan, the Rabbanan answered carrying from one to the other even when they are close to each other, even when an eruv was made. If the boats belong to one single person, in which case the Erev Chaseritz is not necessary since mutter to transfer items from one boat to the other, even if there is a gap of 4 tvachim. This is because the Chacham were never geyser passing an item over a karmelis between two Rishos HaYochid that belong to the same person, only of two different people. The Erev Chaseritz is all about being ma'ar of the people together. So if you have a gap of 4 tvachim, it creates a problem only where the boats belong to different people. So that an Eruv Chatzeris is needed to permit carrying from one to the other. In this case, a 4 tefach gap nullifies the Erev, is mevatel the Erev, and therefore asers the Haitzah from one boat to the other. Mishnah Vav. Hazorek v'nizkar la'achar sheyatza sameyodeh. We learned in Perek Zayin that a person is chayiv v'chatos for a malacha if he did it b'shoigeg. A shugaga is the violation of a malacha by someone who forgets a Shabbos, or that a certain malacha is also. So if someone throws an item from one rishus to another, but then he remembers that it's Shabbos after the item already left his hand, but before it lands. So the malacha of itzah, it consists of 2 parts: lifting an item from one rishus, called an akira, and placing it down in another rishus, a hanocha. In this case, the person forgot it was Shabbos when he lifted the item and threw it, which is the akira, but then he remembered it was Shabbos before it landed, before the hanocha happened. So, kolta acher, kolta kelavich nisrifa, or he throws an item from one rishus to another and someone intercepts it, or a dog grabs it from mid-ear, or it burnt up in the ear before it lands. Pater, in all these cases, he's pater from a chatas. In the first case, he's pater because only the beginning of his act was done, b'shoigeg, but not the end, because he knew it was Shabbos at the end. Meaning the hanacha was done, he already knew it was Shabbos. And the second case of kol ta'acher, kol ta'kelevesh nisrifa, he's pater because he didn't finish the malacha, he only started it. As the Mishnah will explain, a person is chayiv chatas for performing a malacha b'shoigeg only if he performed the entire malacha b'shoigeg. In this case, however, he was in a state of shugoga only when he started the maisa, but not when it finished, so he's going to be pater from a chatas. Now, the kolta acher, and here's where things get a little interesting. Kolta acher, the person who intercepted the item before it landed, is the one who performed the hanocha of the item, and not the person who threw it. So that's going to be considered a malacha of shnaim shosua, and shnaim shosua are pater. Now, in the case of the dog and the fire, it's not considered hanocha because it didn't land in a place of 4 tvachim wide, which is the minimum area for a hanocha as a rishos hayochid. The person who threw the item is pater in the case of because he never finished the malacha. Doing an akira is not something that's enough to be mechayiv a person for haitzah. Zorak lasis chabura. If someone forgot it was Shabbos and threw an item to give someone a wound, to give someone a boo-boo, ben ba'odam ben b'behema, whether it was a person or whether upon an animal, nizkar, and obviously it's also to do this on Shabbos. Accordingly, the entire action could have happened in a rishos hayochid, since the malacha over here is not haitzah but making a chabura. What that malacha would be considered a tolda of sheichet. So Zorak lasses chabura, if someone forgot it was Shabbos and threw an item to inflict a wound, bein ba'adam bein b'behema, whether it was for a person or for an animal, v'nizkar shlei nasa chabura, and remembered it was Shabbos before he gave the chabura, pater is pater because only in the beginning of his maisa was done b'sheigig, but not at the end. Here, just like in the previous case, he was in a state of shagoga only when he started the malacha, but not when he finished. Therefore, he's pater. Za'aklal. This is the rule. All those that are chayiv to bring korban chatos do not become chayiv unless both the beginning and the end of their maisa, the end of the malacha, occur when they are in the state of shogeg. If the beginning of the maisa occurs when they are in a state of shogeg, but the end of the act occurs when they're in the state of zadon, b'mezid, that's when they remember that it's Shabbos. Or Tchilas and Zadon Sefer Shkaga started off doing it Lichatchila b'Zadon b'Mezid. Then at the end of the malacha, he remembers that it was, and then he forgot what was going on. So then he's pater. B'Turin Achat Heit Tchilas and Sefer Shkaga. They're not chayiv unless both the beginning and the end of the malacha occur when they are in the state of shogeg. Ad kan.